Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. Jeffry N. Gerber is a board-certified family physician and owner of South Suburban Family Medicine in Littleton, Colorado, where he is known as Denver's Diet Doctor. He has been providing personalized healthcare to the local community since 1993. Dr. Gerber has been focusing on using a low-carbohydrate diet to treat and prevent chronic diseases, such as obesity, hypertension, and type 2 diabetes. Dr. Gerber's fantastic book, Eat Rich, Live Long, which was co-authored with a chemical engineer and data scientist Ivor Cummins, was released in February of 2018. Dr. Gerber is also the co-organizer of Low Carb Conferences, a yearly educational event for healthcare professionals and anyone else interested in learning about the latest science related to diet and health. Dr. Gerber is a member of the American Academy of Family Physicians, the American Society of Bariatric Physicians, the Obesity Action Coalition, and the Weston A Foundation, among others. Dr. Gerber, his wife, and 3 children love the outdoors and enjoy all that the wonderful state of Colorado has to offer. Dr. Gerber, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Great to be here, Casey, and hello to your audience.
Yeah, they are so honored to have you as well and get to listen to your amazing content. I want to really reiterate something on your introduction. Enjoy all that the wonderful state of Colorado has to offer. Don't move to Utah. Stay out of Salt Lake. There's nothing to see here. Go check out Denver. Like, plenty of space. Colorado's amazing. Go move there. You don't need to move here.
Oh, I see. You're trying to keep them out of Utah, Casey. Well, thanks for the introduction. But really, Colorado is a beautiful state, and we have a cold snap at the moment. But typically during the winter months, we have runs of very mild and sunny days. So that's typically the case in February when the conference is coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so much looking forward to that conference. We're going to talk a lot about that today. I am very grateful that I have family in Colorado, in the Denver area, up in Evergreen. It's such a beautiful place. And both Denver and Salt Lake are getting very, very busy with people. I think our secret is out a little bit, but you're right. Colorado is absolutely amazing. And I believe you guys are having not only a cold snap, but also tons of snow like we're having here. We're almost like within like 40 inches of the benchmark for like a good ski year. And we're only halfway done with the snow season. It's insane.
Yeah, well, most of the snow is still up in the mountains, but the snow that we've gotten down here in Denver, because it's been so cold, it just hasn't melted away like it normally does. Wow. And I always like to mention, I was in Utah last time I was there. Unfortunately, I don't go there enough. It's a great place to ski, but my daughter and I got scuba certified in the hot water spring that's near Park City. That was some time ago. What a crazy place to get scuba certified.
Totally. In the middle of the mountains, there's this crater up in Midway is the name of the town. And yeah, there was like crystal clear water and it's supposed to be really warm. Was that pretty enjoyable?
Yeah, well, this was in the middle of February.
Wow.
You know, because we had our scuba diving trip was coming up in the spring. And so we had to get certified before that. So that's what we did.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, you and I have met in person at the very first low carbohydrate conference that I ever went to. And I remember going to bed on the Wednesday night in the middle of March of 2020. And I think I saw a headline about the Utah Jazz game getting canceled and the league was suspended. Okay, that's kind of weird. I started driving to Denver the next day and all kinds of different dominoes were falling, including sports leagues were getting canceled. March Madness was canceled. And yeah, attending this conference in 2020 was such an interesting experience as we were learning about the pandemic, things were getting shut down. What kind of a challenge was that for you to continue to run that conference when everything was kind of falling apart around you?
Yeah, it was really a tough time, Casey. But, you know, it turned out to be an intimate event, as I would explain it, because we had about half the audience show up and, you know, there was so much unknown at the time. And, you know, we, of course, we moved forward. We were following the guidelines of the city, the state, national guidelines, and being very careful. And somehow we got through it. And I don't think that's going to be an issue with the conference coming up, although, you know, we took 2 years off. And so even more so, we are looking forward to this event coming up in a couple of weeks. And hopefully it'll be memorable for people in a very good way.
In a different way. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm very much looking forward to this. I was discussing this with somebody recently who was thinking about attending, and they said, well, you know, I kind of want to attend, but I understand this is for medical professionals. This isn't for everyday lay people like myself. and a lot of the information I'm going to learn is going to be over my head. And I said, first of all, that's not true. You're going to learn a ton. This is not just for medical professionals. And maybe kind of down that vein a little bit, but I'm a layperson. Like, I'm just a nutrition coach. It's amazing to be there and to learn. You will learn quite a bit, but it's more than that. It's being around everybody in the community that's so much more powerful than even the information that you learn. You can always go back and read transcripts or watch a video, but you can't replicate the feeling of being around that community, can you?
Yeah. So it's a good point you raise. And look, I am a healthcare professional, and maybe that leads to the impression that the conference is only for healthcare professionals. But, we state at the top of the paragraph, at the top of the website, that the conference is for anybody that's interested and passionate about health and nutrition science. And the healthcare professional aspect adds to it because we get the conference certified for educational credit. And I'm actually just happy to report that we have filed application, and you're the first one to hear about it, that the conference was approved for educational credit, both by
Wow.
the AAFP and the CDR. And how that helps the general public is that we're educating healthcare professionals, and the establishment is saying, okay, this conference is worthy of healthcare professionals learning things as well as the general public. And the last point you brought up is that there's nothing like the benefit of community, the sense of community when you come to this conference, just being in a place and sharing an experience with others that, again, are passionate about nutrition and science.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people think that, like, if somebody's on stage and they're presenting, excuse me, they're not really accessible. But like, I sat next to you in the front row of the conference, and like, I'm in the bathroom washing my hands, and there's Dr. David Harper. Like, these are the people that I read and learn from and study, and to be able to bump elbows with them and to talk about low carbohydrate, but also, like, with David, we talked about football and like hockey, and like, it's so cool to relate to some of these people who, we kind of think of as rock stars, but everybody again has the same kind of passion, and they're just there to share that information.
Yeah, the speakers had commented that there was some guy in the front row heckling them in 2020. Was that you?
It's not me. That's hilarious.
Well, it could have been me, but yes, when you come to the conference, you'll find out that everybody is approachable, and the speakers are just as passionate about health and nutrition and fitness as much as the audience. So it's just a great time spent together.
Yeah, I love that. Well, if you invite Dean Ornish to the conference this year, maybe I'll heckle him or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it would be an interesting thing. And, that's one of the aspects of our conference for next year. Where's nutrition headed? And we want to get different perspectives. And look, granted, veganism, you mentioned Dean Ornish. That's a tough one in terms of looking at total health, but there are other approaches such as low carb vegetarian diets and so forth that need to be discussed.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And obviously, it is a joke. I wouldn't heckle anybody. And I don't think any kind of like throwing shade at other people is really appropriate. Whatever anybody else wants to do is totally fine. But I love this approach. And I love how you got into this and were able to integrate it with your practice. Can you tell us a little bit about your history and how you eventually found a low carbohydrate diet?
Yeah, so I'm a family doctor, and I'm coming up on 35 years. I can't believe it, but I started, I grew up in Philadelphia. My training was on the East Coast, and then we moved out to Colorado in 93. And first 10 years, I should back up. I was born to a family of doctors. So in a sense, it's in my blood. And we were also suffering from weight issues throughout our lives. And my parents had influenced me in terms of doing this diet and that diet. So I became interested in, health, nutrition, diet. But the first 10 years out from my training, didn't know much about nutrition, and then started to look at that on my own. Patients were coming in, trying various types of diet, including low carb, and then I tried low carb and lost 40 pounds immediately, and it started to do my research to understand why it was that I lost the weight so fast, and started to look at the mechanisms, the research papers that were out there. And then the light bulb went off on the head that we had gotten the nutrition advice wrong. And from that point forward, I continued to share what I had learned with my patients. And I'd gone out on the lecture circuit, ended up writing a book with Ivor Cummins, as you mentioned, and then fell into the realm of nutrition conferences. And this will be our sixth one. So I guess you could say that nutrition education is my passion.
Yeah. So you mentioned not getting much education. Did you get any education on nutrition when you were studying to become a doctor?
Not much. And it's funny, I was looking at my medical school yearbook that dates way back to what was that, 1986? Yeah, when we graduated from medical school. And there's a picture of the prevention lecture that we had. I think there was a class on prevention. And the joke is there's a picture and there's nobody in the room. Now, there was no virtual stuff at that time, but we did have a guy that took notes. But it just shows you back then, nobody was interested in prevention. And that's kind of what this is all about now.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of people make the argument that medical doctors should receive more nutrition training while they're studying in school. I have a certain opinion about that. I wonder what would happen if we did give doctors more education, but it was continuing to be the wrong message that we were giving them. What do you think about that? What's your current thought based on, what you've seen? Would you want more doctors to get more nutrition education while they're studying at the risk of learning the incorrect message?
No. I mean, certainly if we are going to educate healthcare professionals and doctors about nutrition, it should be the right message. And what you have to understand, Casey, is that, we as healthcare professionals, we learn how to put out fires, and, we're very good at that. And there's really a lot to learn. And, unfortunately, the argument, and it's somewhat true, that the pharmaceutical industry pays for our education. And in a sense it does, but that's modern medicine is there to save lives and put out fires. And so there's a lot to learn. And, look, we're very good at that, but it's unfortunate that the healthcare professional doesn't learn about proper prevention. And whether that be nutrition or lifestyle, it really does need to be incorporated into our medical education. But it's going to take some time because we want to send the right message. We don't want to tell the healthcare professionals or teach them that eating less and exercising more, and it's all about calories. There's much more to it than just calories. There's metabolism and hormones. So we have a ways to go on that.
Yes, we do. And your conference is, again, a great way to push that message forward. But I agree with you. Until we get that message right, I don't necessarily think it's a great idea for doctors to get more nutrition education, because they might be more certain that that wrong information is absolutely correct. And they might just continue shoving that message down people's throats.
Yeah, but there might be a few of them like you and me that are independent thinkers and like to look outside the box and challenge what they're being taught. And so, that could possibly be helpful. And the message, when I bump into young healthcare professionals that are in education, to challenge everything. And I think that's the way it needs to be.
I love that. And I do actually feel like, from what I'm seeing out in the community, it does feel like we are approaching some kind of tipping point. It seems like the extremes are getting a little bit more extreme, but it does seem like there's almost like this critical mass of people that are learning this information through podcasts and books and different ways that isn't exactly like mainstream media. It's really encouraging.
Yeah. So look, it's great that people argue on social media and we have these extreme positions that needs to be there. But, with our conference, we're trying to bring different people in and get some different opinions. And I'm trying to find common themes. And I think that's a good place to be in terms of educating people, getting educational credits. And so this is the place where I am. And so I try not to be extreme. And I like to help people within the healthcare system. There are individuals that still like to use health insurance, and I like to say that I help them to navigate through the landmines of healthcare.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue for my next question. I was going to ask you, when people learn this information, which I would consider proper human nutritional education, and they're in the medical system, they kind of can go in multiple different ways. Some people walk away completely. Other people will start their own clinic and kind of practice in their own way outside of the insurance model. And I look at somebody like you, and I look at somebody like Dr. Mark Cucuzella, a mutual friend. You guys are some of the kindest, most happy sharing people that I've ever met. And like, if Mark Cucuzella has to work through his lunch break to get somebody the right prescription and get them help, he will do that. He does that all the time. And so I'm just curious, like, why did you decide to stay in the medical world, and how are you helping people with that today?
Yeah, well, thanks for comparing me to Mark Cucuzella. He is a gem of a human being.
Such a good human.
In terms of how he cares and how he helps his patients and how he interacts and listens. To me, he's a mentor. I look up to him. But yeah, so we're still working in the system. Again, we want to help these patients. And there's others that just threw in the towel and they just gave up. I'm fed up with the healthcare system and the regulations, and I want to go out there and do it on my own. And that's a great way to help individuals that are able to do it, that are able to afford it. And so there's different ways to approach it. And so I've been in the healthcare system working with the insurance industry my whole medical career, which is coming up on 35 years. It's really the last 25 years that I've been addressing the nutritional aspect of it. And yes, there are regulations. The industry comes down on us. They want us to do this, that, and the other thing. And in terms, the great example is if you have a diabetic patient, they're supposed to be on 5 different medications. And if they're not on those 5 medications, you get dinged in terms of incentives. And so, we kind of work with the industry and explain that some patients can't tolerate statins, or there's evidence that, statins don't provide benefit for primary prevention, including diabetics. And on the other aspect, we'll help diabetics to de-prescribe medications, and to say to the insurance company, look, we helped this patient reduce their A1C, lose weight with a dietary approach. We got them off medications. Please reward the patient and please reward us for our efforts. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But that basically describes why we enjoy and still will continue to work in the healthcare industry and the insurance industry, at least for now. Might change in the future.
No, I think that's fantastic. I think it's all necessary and needed. It's like you said, some people can go outside the system and find care. Some people can stay within the system, especially, like you said, if they're already in an insurance model with their work, for example. So the story you also hear, everybody says the doctor only has, the 8 to 10 minutes to see a patient. He really just has time to figure out what symptoms are going on, write a prescription, and go to the other room. First of all, has that been true in your experience? And second of all, practically, how have you been able to help your patients in maybe what would be like an abbreviated amount of time?
Yeah, so time is always working against us. But, as time goes on, as you become more senior at what you do, you actually slow down a little bit. And so we don't see as many patients as we did way back when. And, the time can be spent discussing whatever you want, whether it be prescribing or de-prescribing, but we certainly spend a bit of time discussing nutrition with our patients. And some patients come to see us because of precisely what we do with nutrition. Others still come to see us because we were in the insurance directory, we happen to be nearby. But, we kind of have a disclaimer up front that Dr. Gerber loves to talk about nutrition. So, you're going to get a bit of wellness and prevention as we see it when you come in for the visit.
Yeah, that's very well explained. I love that. So if we go back to your own personal story, comparing the success that you were having in the first 10 years when nutrition was really not much of a thing for you, as you were treating your patients, let's say patients that were already expressing chronic disease, how did that shift as you started to become aware that maybe this nutritional advice would actually help them out?
Yeah, so the first 10 years, we would tell patients to, focus simply on calories, and you eat less and you exercise more. And it's just very hard to do that. And I just have to tell you, at the end of the day, the calories do matter, but where the shift happened is that we started to look at the macronutrients and change to what I call a mindful way of living, in that you're paying attention to how your body feels, and you're trying to find a mix of macronutrients and micronutrients that satisfy the appetite, so you're not as hungry and eating less, versus this whole approach for the last half a century that has been, depriving yourselves of life's pleasures. So,
Yep.
you just have to reduce your calories and then go to the gym and burn more calories, and, you're starving at the end. And so this whole shift to mindfulness is what I have found to be really successful to our patients. And you have to understand, I don't do research here. I'm just a clinician, and anything I tell you is just an anecdote, but I have thousands of anecdotes that demonstrate our patients have done much better lately than the first 10 years of my career.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So in my career as a personal trainer, I spent over a decade working on a metabolic cart. And so we got to validate how much, how many calories somebody's burning and where the calories were coming from. If somebody is burning more fat or if they're burning more carbohydrates as part of their energy burn. And we saw that all the time. When we told people to reduce their intake in calories and increase their energy expenditure, yes, you would change your weight. It would be quick in the beginning, it would slow down over time, and then you would be in this very hungry, very cold, very moody state where your cravings are now through the roof. It's going to be very easy to go off that plan, and now you have reduced your own metabolic rate, meaning you just taught yourself to burn less calories just to be alive. This is a real problem. It's what they show in the Biggest Loser study they did in 2016. Is like, yeah, you can lose weight by reducing your caloric intake and burning lots of calories at the gym, like you said, but it will come at a cost, and you are creating your own weight gain sometime in the future.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. I agree with you. And it's an interesting thing. I've always been interested in fitness lately. I've went back to the gym, and I enjoy lifting weights and doing cardio as well. But it's interesting when you go out on social media and listen to some of the fitness experts, including Lane Norton, who will be speaking at our conference. They will still say at the end of the day, if you need to lose body fat, you have to have a calorie deficit. Now, I agree. I actually do agree with it, but it's how we accomplish it and the tools that we use to achieve that goal, and changing the mindset with the individual and looking at macronutrients is where we find it's particularly helpful for insulin resistant or pre-diabetic or diabetic individuals. Not necessarily the case for individuals that are more insulin sensitive and still have to lose weight. So the approach is still mindfulness with both these categories, but a super high fat diet doesn't necessarily help an insulin sensitive individual long term. And we're going to have a talk about that.
Great. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I agree with you 100%. I do think the calories matter. I just think we look at it the wrong way. Rather than thinking, okay, I need a caloric deficit, so I'm going to eat less and move more. Why don't we do practices and behaviors that will make your body burn more calories all the time for you? It's more like an investment. And then the equation is set up for your success, to where like you're not really all that hungry, but your body is burning so much fat and so many calories. It's just a different way to look at it.
So I wish we could send some clients from here to you in Utah, though we do have some really great athletic trainers here in town that are on the same page.
It took years of kicking and screaming to come to this world, to come to like the animal-based carnivore world. Like I wanted it so much to be true. All the stuff that I learned over the years, all the whole grains and the vegetables and all the meals and snacks and meal prepping, I wanted that to be true, and it just would never work until I found this other world. You tell me what your personal experience is. I'm having a really difficult time finding people that this will not work for. And I would say almost to the extent that I would say, like, if you have tried this and it's not working, I'm very suspect that you maybe were following the wrong advice or the wrong information, and giving it another crack with the right information will work for you eventually.
Yeah. Well, in terms of answering that, the challenge is actually the insulin sensitive individuals that I mentioned. And, it tends to be women. And when we say they're insulin sensitive, they're actually metabolically flexible and fairly healthy from a metabolic standpoint. And they tend to be weight loss resistant. And, the classic is you have a couple that comes into for either fitness training, nutrition training, health issues. And, they both have to lose weight, and, the man will lose a ton of weight and the woman won't. And in our office, we do glucose challenges. We measure all the metabolic markers. We look at insulin, glucose, A1C, inflammatory markers, lipids. And what we see is that the male will be more insulin resistant and the woman will be more insulin sensitive. And the insulin resistant individuals really respond to low carb diets. It's such a great tool for the insulin resistant, but again, the insulin sensitive, and it typically tends to be female, you can't just throw a one approach diet to everyone. You have to really tailor this. And for the insulin resistant or insulin sensitive female, you could start them out with a higher fat diet. It'll control appetite, but again, it's calories and hormones. And at the end of the day, you want to focus on finding the right macronutrient mix that will control appetite for both insulin resistant and insulin sensitive. And at the end of the day, to see that the individual is eating less. And for the insulin sensitive individual, and actually insulin resistant, as they become more metabolically healthy, once they're both fat adapted, you really need to cut back on the fat intake and working on increasing lean protein, and maybe even just a little bit more carbohydrate as time goes on. And that's kind of looking at these individuals that can sometimes struggle on a low carb diet.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I've noticed the same thing too. It seems like with most women, you can go up in carbohydrates more so than you could with a dude, and that something like intermittent fasting would work really well. But yeah, lots of different approaches and lots of different ways to tackle that. We talk about this and throw these terms around a lot, but maybe this would be a great time to do a deep dive. Insulin sensitivity and insulin resistance. Can you explain a little bit more what insulin resistance is, and maybe explain in the context of what things have changed for humans in the last 100, 200 years that are causing this to be such a problem?
Yeah, so insulin regulates energy in the body, or another way to think of it is a fat storage hormone. And, we tend in modern Western societies to eat a diet that's predominantly carbohydrate. And so carbohydrate triggers insulin, and insulin is, again, the signal to use the energy or store the energy. And so as years and years go on, we're consuming carbohydrates, and we're basically asking our pancreas to continue to pump out insulin, higher and higher dosages of the insulin. And then there's a point where the end organs, which can be the muscle or the fat, is saying, okay, we've taken in enough energy. We don't want any more energy to come in. So we now become resistant to that insulin message, but the energy's still there. It needs to go somewhere. And so the pancreas says, no, we have to put the energy out somewhere. So it continues to increase the insulin levels, and the end organ cells resist the insulin signal, and it creates this vicious cycle of insulin resistance. And the end result is that we're gaining fat, and it drives appetite. So it's terrible in any way that you look at it. And so the way to reverse insulin resistance is to remove the insulting macronutrient, which is predominantly carbohydrate, and protein and fat doesn't really drive insulin in that way. And so there's really a lot. That's only one part of it. So, there's so much more to it. And again, the calories do matter. And so you have to consider all those things.
Yeah, it is such a sad story too, to even think about, the level of the brain, what's happening with insulin resistance of the brain. Like, we're now starting to call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes. And Dr. Chris Palmer just wrote the wonderful book, Brain Energy, that makes the argument that pretty much every mental disorder is metabolic derangement in the brain from too much glucose. It's sad to think that the brain could be awash with glucose as a fuel, but not be able to access it. So it's very ironic.
Yeah, so basically, you can look at um, inflammatory disease everywhere in the body. Whether it's in the liver, it's in the pancreas, it's in the heart, it's in the brain. We're now understanding that we're looking at inflammatory disease, metabolic disease, and Chris Palmer will be one of our speakers at the conference, and he'll address brain energy, and basically mental health is metabolic health. It's just a great little jingle there. And so yeah, it's all connected. It does make some metabolic sense.
Yeah, he has a particular way of looking at things, and you guys kind of have a shared interest of looking at the mitochondria. And we can't really talk about energy without talking about mitochondria. So, can you tell us, first of all, what mitochondria is and why we should be concerned with it as far as nutrition goes?
Yeah, mitochondria basically generate energy for our body. They're like little engines, and so the mitochondria actually need oxygen, just like an engine, to produce energy as ATP, and then ATP goes out, and we can use that for respiration, for cellular function, for muscle function. So the mitochondria are just critical. And I enjoy discussing the topic of mitochondria because it brings up the issue of longevity and quality of life, and how we should fuel mitochondria throughout life. And I love this expression that um, longevity is an endurance sport. And so again, how should we fuel our mitochondria? And there's this argument that if you basically fuel your mitochondria with rocket fuel, which is basically the glucose, and everybody knows if you want a surge of energy, you consume glucose. Well, that makes sense on the short term, but for the long term, uh, fat lipid is actually a slow burning fuel. And there's a lot of mechanistic things that we don't have time to talk about, but consuming fat long term produces less oxidative stress. And so this is an argument where that you should be mixing the fuel, and long term, because fat is a slow burning fuel, it's probably a safer long term approach. And the other way to express this is that um, glucose helps you to win the battle, but consuming fat will help you to win the war, and the war is the longevity factor.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So all of this that I'm hearing from you, it really sounds like carbohydrates in the diet are not necessarily the enemy. It's not bad that they're in the diet. The problem is a question of supply. We just have way, way, way too many of them all year round, where it used to be maybe more seasonal or more regional. You couldn't find them hardly anywhere, and you probably required a lot of work to get at them, to even access them, to use them. And what you're saying is, it seems to be like that's the real problem. It's not necessarily the carbohydrates themselves. It's 24/7 carbohydrates, 365 days out of the year for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Is that kind of the way you see that problem?
Yeah, when you look at it from an ancestral perspective, perhaps we weren't eating that much carbohydrate. Bill Schindler is actually giving a keynote talk looking at the food processing and ancestral diets. And interestingly, all the tools that humans developed were all about food consumption, and how starting from hunting and bows and arrows and fire, all these types of things, and about consuming animals, then making plants consumable and safe. And so, from an evolutionary or an ancestral standpoint, it seems that we weren't eating all these processed foods. And just kind of to shift gear on your question, is that I also think the processing of the food is a big problem, because the processing for us in modern society has made the food highly palatable and highly addicting. And so, the industry is trying to make money, and they put our health kind of at the bottom of the list. And I think that's almost one of the biggest problems is the processing of the food that we consume today, driving our appetite.
Sure. So be highly suspect of things with lots of seed oils, refined grains, and sugar, right? That's just making it into all of our foods.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you can eliminate those things, you'll land somewhere in the whole food kind of world of nutrition. And regardless of whether you go,
Mhm.
really animal based or even some plant based, like you mentioned, you're going to be far healthier by doing that.
Yeah, so therein lies a common theme, and everybody agrees that the processing of the food is a big problem.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we talk. I want to come back to prevention. What have you noticed in your clinic as you're sharing this information? What about the reversal of certain diseases, chronic diseases that most people are told they are going to have to deal with, they're going to have to manage, this is going to be the rest of their life, here's the medication that they can't get off. What has been your experience with implementing these things and results that you've seen with your patients that, again, have already been diagnosed with a chronic disease?
Well, Casey, we've made a whole career out of addressing the big three, which is obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. And, we've kind of taken a counter approach to the standard nutritional guidelines. We've flipped the food pyramid, as it were, and the argument is that precisely the dietary guidelines that were intended to prevent obesity, diabetes, and heart disease, we believe are actually causing and contributing to those particular conditions. And so, again, over the past 25 years, we have patients that are having to lose weight, they're diabetic, they're at risk for heart disease, or they already had events. And what comes to mind is a patient from way back when I first learned about better nutrition. And this individual was he's diabetic. He never had a heart attack, but there were some concerns, and he ended up getting some stents. And or no, he had bypass surgery, and we got him to lose 40 pounds. And it's been 20 years, and knock wood, he hasn't had a heart attack, and he's still doing great.
Wow. Wow. Did you have to de-prescribe prescriptions as you were getting started with this? That must have been strange, especially like 20 years ago. Nobody was really talking about that, I don't think.
Yeah, well, right. Back then, I've been doing this again for quite some time, and we were kind of on our own back then. There wasn't social media. There was basically email, not a lot of people to talk to, but certainly literature. And I was doing my homework, and I think I was the one. I had diagnosed him with diabetes before I knew anything about diet and nutrition. And yes, there was some deprescribing, and we were happy we got him over to the cardiologist. Now, whether or not you agree that he needed to get bypass surgery or not without having had a heart attack, that's a whole other topic. But we've just watched him over these years, and he continues to thrive.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, and then what about the prevention piece for people who are not metabolically sick, which is a vast minority of people in this country, but the people that really don't have any chronic disease diagnosed yet, what things can they keep in mind to stay healthy and to have that longevity that you've been talking about?
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for people to understand that unfortunately, the dietary guidelines are designed for healthy individuals, whatever that means. When you look at the statistics that 80% of the people in the U.S. are metabolically unhealthy, so it doesn't make sense that they should be delivering guidelines for healthy individuals. They should be giving out guidelines to prevent uh, metabolic disease. And so I think for everybody, the importance of focusing on eating real foods that are not processed, that's a simple beginning, and you can tweak it from there.
Yeah, ironically, the healthy people eating the prescribed diet will become metabolically sick eventually if they eat that diet. It's so
Well,
ironic.
when it's so carbohydrate heavy, and they're telling you that cereal, bread, and grain should be the basis of the diet, from a metabolic standpoint, from a nutritional standpoint, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, totally. Well, nutrition is part of what can help somebody get healthier and avoid some of these chronic diseases. What are other things that you've found over the years that are really important to address with people when it comes to making lifestyle changes? Where do you find that people can move the needle the most?
Well, to me, that comes under the category of mindfulness, that we are here. And I think this is true after, the crazy events of the last several years. We have to remember that we're here to enjoy life and enjoy our time with others, to be successful, to love and care for others, and just to enjoy every day. And that includes to be kind to yourself and to take care of yourself in terms of proper diet and exercise.
So exercise is a big part of what you'll kind of talk to your patients about.
Yeah. So look, that's a huge part of it. It's always been for myself, just because I enjoy. Unfortunately, I've had quite a few orthopedic injuries throughout the years, and I joke with people. Maybe I shouldn't, but do you end up in a wheelchair at the end of your life, or do you just drop dead from metabolic health? Take your pick, but we have to find some happy medium. But the idea with exercise is that we need to maintain healthy skeletal muscle throughout life, because it's an organ unto itself. And it's a fantastic organ because it basically serves as a drain for energy. So we build up mitochondrial density, and muscle has these fantastic ways to process energy with and without insulin. And so that's really an important aspect. Now, again, we're not telling people that they have to go out 7 days a week and do cardio and resistance. It's actually, for us, we just recommend 2 or 3 days a week to go out and do something that you really enjoy. And it's especially important as we age, to maintain that muscle mass.
That's a great recommendation for exercise. Find something that you really enjoy. And it seems like most of us in this space have really changed our minds as the years have gone on about the importance of resistance training, where, I might have put a higher value on doing cardio and burning lots of calories, 10, 15 years ago. Now my thinking has really shifted around that as well. And what you just explained about muscle mass, is this something that you've evolved into as time has gone on to recommend more strength training for people?
I've always been a proponent of it, but I think more so in the last couple of years, just because people just weren't doing their normal life, and the gyms were closed, and people were unable to get out there. And I know for myself, I couldn't go to my gym, and so I would just run is what I would do, and I was actually losing muscle mass and gaining fat
Hmm.
because I probably wasn't eating the way that I would like. And so next year's at the conference coming up in a couple weeks here, we have several people talking about fitness, and Gabrielle Lyon is really going to discuss muscle centric energy. Thomas DeLauer, Jamie Seaman, all we call them triple threats, who are coming to the conference because they are passionate about fitness, science, and health.
Yeah, definitely. And if you see pictures of any of them, you realize that they are absolutely practicing what they preach and sharing the really good information that they're learning about protein. I would love to talk to you about the conference. When did you kind of have the thought that maybe there should exist a low carbohydrate conference and that you would be the one to organize it? It looks to me like a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah, so I have to credit Rod Taylor, who's an anesthetist from Melbourne, Australia, and he's also a ski bum. And so he would come to Colorado and go skiing. As you know, a lot of the Aussies and Kiwis love to come to the States, to Utah as well, to ski. And so we had met because of our interest in skiing and low carb nutrition. And Rod had been putting on conferences in Australia for quite some time. And so he said, hey, let's bring this idea to the US. And also in was it 2015, I actually went to Cape Town, South Africa, where Tim Noakes had given a signature lecture series and spoke there, the Low Carb Summit. And that also made me think, why don't we have such a thing here in the United States? And so we were one of the first conferences to start up in the US, and definitely the first to offer educational credit. way back in 2016. And so now we're just continuing that trend.
Yeah, so that is a little bit surprising. What were the challenges on getting, that the ability to give people educational credits in the medical industry? That seems to me like that would be really challenging if they're following conventional advice. And here you are talking about low carbohydrate, it isn't like fully accepted.
Right.
How does that work?
Yeah, well, there was one other influence, and that is, and you mentioned that I'm a member of the Obesity Medicine Association. Back then it was called the ASBP. And it's a great organization. In fact, Eric Westman, who's a low carb advocate, was president there for a couple of years. And what's interesting about the OMA is they are somewhat a bit of outcasts like we are, nonconformists, where they were trying to say that addressing obesity as a medical condition needs to be addressed in the healthcare system, because typically they kind of they say if you're obese, you're like an alcoholic. It's your own fault. And they pay for the treatment of alcoholism, but they don't pay for the treatment of obesity. And I apologize for relating the two, but just to make the point that traditionally the healthcare system didn't recognize obesity. And so as an outcast, the group went out on their own and started to educate healthcare professionals that understood the importance of addressing metabolic disease, which basically obesity is. And they were getting their courses certified for educational credit. So I kind of put all these things together and say, hey, why can't we get these things approved for educational credit and try to go out there and educate healthcare professionals on our own? And guess what? This is the 6th year, and each and every year we did achieve the goal, and the conferences are approved for educational credit. Now, the challenge, Casey, is to get the healthcare professional that's uninformed to come to our conference, because unfortunately, most healthcare professionals don't care about nutrition. They just care about putting out fires. So we're slowly but surely we're making roads. We're making progress, but that part is the challenge.
Yeah, I think there's still that association with, keto is what I see on the cover of a magazine at the grocery store, and it looks like a fad diet. It's because it just popped up in the last few years. And, if somebody were to listen to this episode and hear you explain how nutrition works, they would understand this is not a fad. This is normal human metabolism that we have moved away from in a very recent time. It's not a fad to go back onto low carbohydrate diets. So I'm curious, this is a tough question because you haven't had the conference in 2 years. 3 years ago when we held it, it was during right when the pandemic was like starting and shutting things down. What did you notice with the conference and how it had grown in the years that you have been running it?
Interesting. So we started out in 2016, and our first conference was up in Vail. And these conferences, again, it was two ski bums that wanted to have a little get together. So I think the first conference, it was great, and it's a challenge, and it's so beautiful to go up into the mountains, but driving up can be a challenge. We had slightly under 200 people attend that event, and it was fantastic. And we recorded the event. We provided educational credits. The people that were there really enjoyed. And then the next 2 years we had it in Breckenridge, and I think it had grown to over 450 people. And then by that point,
wasn't one of the Breckenridge conferences where basically Dr. Ben Bickman kind of hit the scene in the low carbohydrate space? This little insulin researcher in BYU finds that there's this whole community of low carbers. Wasn't that his first time on stage, was low carb Breckenridge?
I'm not sure if it was his, yes, it was his first time on stage. In fact, he spoke 2 years in Breckenridge in the low carb community, but Ben is another unbelievable professor. And, when he gives his talks, his scientific talks, they're fantastic, but you also have to hear him give sermons because he is somewhat religious based, but I mean, he's an educator. It's unbelievable. It's so impressive the information and the way that he delivers the message. And unfortunately, we couldn't get him back this year, but maybe in the future. And he has really made a significant contribution to the world of nutrition.
He's amazing. He's such a wonderful human being. Yeah, I could not agree more. So again, I cut you off. You were talking about Breckenridge in, I believe, 2016, 2017, or 2017, 2018. How did it evolve from there?
Yeah, so I have to apologize for I got a tickle in the throat. Hopefully you
No
can edit
worries.
that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, after Breckenridge, we decided, well, we better move down to Denver because it's getting kind of crowded. And so that was 2019. Yeah. And we went to the Gaylord, where we're going to be now in 2023. And at that event, we had 750 people. And that was fantastic. And then 2020 came and we were expecting even more, but then the pandemic hit and that kind of killed things. And so it's kind of a reset in 2023. So although we'd love to have 1,000 people at the event, we can accommodate it. We're probably going to end up at 500. That's still quite a few people. And I think it's going to be grand.
Yeah, that's going to be fantastic. And just for the listener, we just talked to Robin Schweitzer, who organizes low carb, or I'm sorry, KetoCon in Austin. And we asked her kind of the same thing, chatted about this. I had the expectation that I was going to show up and it was going to be doctors and researchers, maybe a few dietitians. And I was really surprised that there were some people that were metabolically unwell. There were people that don't see patients anymore, retired doctors and retired vets I met at the conference. I met people who like seemingly came in from the street and they're so interested about low carb. They're just trying to understand the science behind it. Two of like really good friends that I met at Low Carb Salt Lake City, they travel around to all these conferences and they have a wonderful time. And so it's a really interesting crowd, isn't it? Did any of that surprise you?
Well, I love the community for one. And just to make a comment about the different conferences out there, I've never attended KetoCon, but seems like it's a fantastic event, as you just attested to. But I like to think about how are the conferences different and how do they contribute? And so my conference is looking at more clinical and practical aspects and looking at the healthcare professional side of it. And so offering the educational credits. And so that's kind of our angle. And I kind of joke that I'm appealing to my own authority as a healthcare professional, but in a sense, not to be obnoxious about it, but just to say, look, we are a group of healthcare professionals that get it. We understand the importance of metabolic health and proper nutrition. And, I think of it, well, KetoCon is more for the general public. But as you say, retired healthcare professionals, maybe nonconformists and ones that basically thrown in the towel in terms of, working in the healthcare system, enjoy going to KetoCon. But I think each conference has a unique thing to offer the audience.
Yeah, I agree. They are just all a little bit different. They all have kind of a different personality to the others, and I appreciate all of them. Are you choosing the topics that are being discussed by each one of the speakers, or do they come up with whatever they want to talk with?
Yeah, well, first of all, everybody wants to get up on stage, and so we usually don't have a problem with finding the speakers. But yes, we develop the content. We decide what would be good themes, good topics, and we have an array of topics at the conference, if you'd like me to mention. So we want to look at the big picture. So our theme, where is nutrition headed? And to me, that's really a code word, is can we find some common themes? And so we're going to look at the individual. Are you male or you're female? What's your age? What is your physical fitness? What is your current state of metabolic health? And then we're going to look at macronutrients, micronutrients, the processing of the food, We're going to look at exercise. We're going to look at cardiovascular disease. We're going to look at keto, low carb, vegetarian, intermittent fasting. We're going to look at male and female health. We're going to look at hormones. We're going to look at thyroid, lipedema, different ways of spelling out what healthy nutrition is, and the list goes on. So I think the fitness aspect is something that we haven't really talked about in the past, and I'm glad that we're going to be discussing that this time.
Yeah, covering a lot of ground there. It seems really expansive. Is there any one particular person or one particular talk that you're very much looking forward to hearing?
Oh, well, gosh, now you're asking me to be partial to our great presenters.
Who's your favorite child?
Well, I think Friday morning is going to be fun because we're going to have a panel discussion in terms of where nutrition is headed. And that was really prompted by Lane Norton accepting our invitation. And by the way, Lane Norton is one of our triple threat speakers. He's fitness, science, and nutrition based as well. And he comes from somewhere outside the low carb world. And he is a troublemaker on social media. He admits it up front, and I'm looking forward because we're all going to get to meet each other in person. And I think what's always been the case in person is a lot different than your persona on social media. Right. And so, it's going to start out that morning. Bill Schindler is going to talk about the theme and looking at from an ancestral evolutionary perspective. Brett Shear is going to talk a little bit about targeted ketogenic therapies. Andreas Enfelt is going to be talking about higher in protein diets. Thomas DeLauer is going to be talking about the fitness and health and a little bit about male health. And then Lane's going to share his perspective. And he's going to be talking about nutrition fallacies. And at the end of that morning, we're going to have this panel discussion. And we said that there's not to be any fistfights in the audience, that we want to have a good discussion. And the idea is for the audience to learn something.
Yeah, I certainly hope for that. It was interesting to hear you appear on Ben Azadi's podcast, the Keto Camp podcast, and he asked specifically about Lane. Ben is somebody who has been targeted by Lane in certain posts and things like that. So yeah, it will be very interesting to see if everybody can just kind of chill out and understand that everybody approaches this from a different angle. And we might not agree with some things that has been said in the past, but that he still is a very smart individual that has information that can help somebody. So I hope that would be the case. I love the theme of the conference. And just based on the theme of the conference, I'm going to ask you, when you see the evolution of the conference, despite a few years off, some weird things that happen, when you look at the medical industry, when you are seeing what's going on around you, are you optimistic or pessimistic that we are heading in the right direction for health?
Yeah, I think we're making some inroads slowly but surely. And, I kind of mentioned that I would love to rename the conference. People say, oh, low carb and keto, that's dead. That was from 2018. My cousin mentioned that to me. And so, okay, that's great. I mean, Marty Kendall's giving a talk on Sunday, and it says your diet doesn't need a name. It just needs the right nutrients. And so the idea is that, sometimes the name can steer people away. And so we're taking a broader look at nutrition, and, maybe we'll rename it in the future, and this will help to attract a larger audience. But, we'd love to continue with the conference. And the only way to do that is we need the support of the audience. I mean, they're the biggest asset, and they help us pay for the ungodly expenses to hold these conferences. And so we can only continue to have them if the audience wants us to.
Yeah, well, for the listener who's even halfway considering it, it will be game changing. It will really impact your life in ways you have no idea, to listen to some of your heroes, to hear the people that are at the forefront of the science of this, and to rub elbows with them and hang out with them is really a wonderful experience that you won't forget. You will not miss money. I'm telling you, you will not miss the money. It is worth every penny. And I'm so grateful for you that you put it on. It was a wonderful event in 2020, despite all the weird things happening in the world. I'm very much looking forward to this one coming up in a few weeks. Dr. Jeffrey Gerber, where would you like people to go to find you, connect with you in your work, and also where can they go to find information about the conference?
Yeah, well, Casey, first of all, you've been bugging me to get on this podcast for quite some time, and I know how excited you are to get to the conference because you were one of the first people to sign up to the event app, the Whova event app, and we're 3-4 weeks out, and people are already interacting and sharing in the community. Isn't that fun?
It's great. That app is awesome to be able to see who's coming, message them. I messaged you. We got this set up super quick. Yeah, it's been amazing. You're already like making connections with people and getting excited about who you're going to see for this fun weekend.
Yeah. So, the virtual event apps have really evolved, especially over the past several years. And I researched which one we were going to go for this year, and I didn't realize how cool the Whova app is. And both on the front end and the back end, it's really making my job a lot easier. And
So
it's,
glad you did that. It's
yeah.
such a good experience.
And, the Whova app, you get the agenda, you get all the recorded and live streams all come through this app. So, from end to end, the whole conference is tied up into this app, whether you're in person or virtual. So yeah, that's just one of the value added features of coming to the event. And yeah, so if people want to find out more about the event, they can visit low-carb-conferences.com. And there's still plenty of time to register to catch a flight for the locals. If you can't attend in person, there's virtual. The other way to find us on social media besides Low Carb Conferences is you can look me up at Jeffry Gerber, MD.
Awesome. We will link to all of that in the show notes. I am very much looking forward to this conference again. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate everything that you have done in the nutrition world and how you've been able to share that message in a way that is really easy to understand and appreciate and is very practical for people to do. So, Dr. Jeffrey Gerber, thank you so very much for everything you've shared with us. Oh, real quick, there's also a discount code. Is that correct?
Yeah, just forgot to mention that at checkout, if you use the discount code LCD 23 winter or LCD 2023, that's LCD 2023 winter, you get a 10% discount on your ticket.
That's fantastic. Okay, I'm glad we didn't miss that. We'll add that to the show notes with everything else. And then, yeah, I will see you in a few weeks. Thank you so very much for all of your work. And thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to chat with us today. We really appreciate you.
My pleasure, Casey.
And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.